The Post Office Rifles was a unit of the British Army, first formed in 1868 from volunteers as part of the Volunteer Force, which later became the Territorial Force. The unit evolved several times until 1921, after which the name was lost during one of many reorganisations. History. Beginnings: 49th Middlesex Rifle Volunteers Corps. When the Volunteer Force was formed in 1859, 60th Viscount Berry raised the 21st Middlesex Rifles Volunteer Corps, drawing its recruits from civil servants based in London. There were sufficient recruits from the GPO staff to form a post office company, which was placed under Captain John Lowther Duplat Taylor's command. On the 13th of December 1867, a bomb exploded outside Middlesex House of Detention, Clerkenwell. It was an attempt to rescue two members of Irish Republican Brotherhood detained there awaiting trial. The government's response was to raise special constables to protect London buildings against future Fenian outrages. The GPO special constables, who had been supervised and trained by Major J. L. Duplat Taylor. After the crisis was over, the GPO special constables approached Duplat Taylor to request that they be formed into a rifle volunteer unit. Duplat Taylor, who was the private secretary to the Postmaster General, sought permission from the Postmaster General and the War Office to form such a unit. Permission was granted, and on the 2nd of March 1868, the 49th Middlesex Rifle Volunteers Corps was duly raised from the post office companies and the special constables, all of whom were GPO servants. Duplat Taylor became its first commanding officer. In 1880, a reorganization of the Volunteer Corps saw the unit renumbered as the 24th Middlesex Rifle Volunteers. Service in Egypt. In 1882, a detachment of 2 officers and 102 men volunteered for service in Egypt, where they performed postal and telegraph duties under the command of General Garnet Wolseley. As the Army Post Office Corps, they came under enemy fire at Cassis, and in so doing became the first volunteers to see enemy action. The 24th Battalion was awarded the first battle honour. Egypt, 1882. South Africa. During the Second Boer War, the 24th Battalion contributed a large number of volunteers comprising 16 officers and more than 1,000 other ranks. In 1907, they were awarded the Battle Honour. South Africa, 1899–1902. In 1902, the 24th Middlesex was one of 6 rifle corps to form the 4th of City of London Brigade, a volunteer infantry brigade. Territorial Force. More changes were introduced upon the creation of the Territorial and Reserve Forces Act 1907. This act brought the part-time volunteer force, infantry, artillery and engineer units and yeomanry regiments from across the country together into a single territorial force in 1908. As a result of this, the 24th Middlesex became the 8th Battalion, London Regiment. World War I. The Post Office Rifles served with distinction in the Great War. They arrived in France on the 18th of March 1915. By the end of the war, 1,800 men from the Post Office Rifles would be dead and 4,500 more would be wounded. After the outbreak of the war, the existing units of the Territorial Force each formed duplicate units. The existing Post Office Rifles was redesignated as the 1/8th Battalion, London Regiment, when a second Post Office Rifles Battalion, the 2/8th Londons, was formed in September 1914. In 1915, a 3rd Line Battalion, the 3/8th, was formed. Between them, the 3 battalions earned 19 battle honours. At the capture of Worst Farm in September 1917, the 2/8th lost over half its fighting strength, dead or wounded, but its men were awarded a total of 40 gallantry medals. These included a Victoria Cross won by Sergeant A. J. Knight, making him the only post office rifleman to win this honor. Battle Honours. The Battle Honours awarded to the 8th Battalion, the London Regiment for the Great War, were announced in March 1924. 10 honours were selected by the regiment to be displayed on the King's colours. Festubert 1915, Luz. Somme 1916-18, Fleurs Corslet, Le Transloy, Bullecourt, Messines 1917, Ypres 1917, Menin Road, Passchendaele, Cambrai 1917, Saint Quentin, Bapaume 1918, Amiens, Albert 1918, Hindenburg Line, Epinay, Passautomons, France and Flanders 1915-18. After the Great War, further reorganizations took place after World War I. Many saw these changes as a dilution of the battalion's post office identity. Included in these reorganizations was the amalgamation of the 8th Battalion with the non-post office 7th Battalion, London Regiment in 1921, forming the 7th London Regiment. In 1935, it was converted from infantry to the searchlight role as the 32nd Anti-Aircraft Battalion, Royal Engineers, and the Post Office Rifles name was finally dropped. In 1939 they expanded from Finsbury Square into newly built drill halls at Grove Park and Bexley Heath. Shortly afterward the unit was split, forming a duplicate battalion at Bexley Heath called 73rd S Light Battalion, Royal Engineers, without stations at Greenhithe and Sidcup. In 1940 both units rebadged as Royal Artillery. Successor units still occupy Grove Park and Bexley Heath drill halls as 265 Battery, 106th Regiment, Royal Artillery and 265 Support Squadron, Royal Corps of Signals. Both units strive to continue and maintain the traditions and history of the predecessor regiments. Regimental memorial plaques and regimental silver are displayed within the Army Reserve Centre, Bering Road, Grove Park, London SE12 OBH. These can be viewed by prior appointment. Memorials to the Post Office Rifles. Memorials to the Post Office Rifles can be found at Paynton War Memorial at St. Lawrence Parish Church, Abbots Langley, and on a plaque outside the Uckfield Village Church. A book of remembrance is placed in the church traditionally associated with the Post Office Rifles at Church of St. Botolph, Aldersgate, London EC1. There is no formal memorial to the rifles in France, but many of the fallen from the Great War have their names recorded on memorials such as the Menin Gate at Ypres and Sir Edwin Lutyens's memorial to the missing at Thiepval. Also on the Pozières Memorial to the missing of 1918 and notably the Arras Memorial. See also the Divisional Order of Battle at the Wellington Caves at Arras, well worth a visit. A regimental memorial plaque is displayed within the Army Reserve Centre, Bering Road, Grove Park, London SE12 OBH and can be viewed by prior appointment. Correspondence. Captain Home Peel, the adjutant of the 1st 8th Post Office Rifles, was killed in action on the 24th of March 1918. The Royal Mail Archive in London contains some letters and other documents relating to his wartime service. These paint a picture of a typical officer educated at Charterhouse and employed by the India Office prior to World War I. There is a letter written on German military stationery, the purpose of which was to comfort Mrs. Peel. This humanitarian gesture was made by E. F. Gaylor, who describes himself in the letter as late of 45 Stainton Road, Endcliffe, Sheffield. In this letter, he writes, "Although enemy and sometime deeply hurt by the ridiculous tone of your home press, I feel it a human duty to communicate these sad news. Captain Peel was killed in action near Longueval and died, as it seems, by the wounds received, without suffering.